quote on this video is, "There is going to be a lot of damage," and that is on the picture of Mohamed El-Erian. There's a larger context to this, and I'm going to play a clip that will give you the totality of the statement that he made. Hi, I'm Ben Reppond. Welcome to my YouTube broadcast. Today is May 23rd, 2023. There's a lot of talk in the press, particularly the financial press, about the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is both financial, economic, as well as political. So it's a current topic. In the interview with Mohamed El-Erian, Jonathan Ferro from Bloomberg asked him a question about what do you think is going to happen, what are the implications? And he explains. His comment is that it's probably going to be resolved. The way this always works, and you've seen ones in the past where this happens, they kind of come right up to the end, they posture, and it looks like it's not going to work, and there's just, we're going to default on our debt. That's the way it looks, and that's negotiation. So, but during the last couple of days, there have been indications that they probably will work it out. There's no guarantee, so they may not. And I think he did this toward the end of last week, this interview. And so I would say the same thing. They are probably going to work it out. But if not, and this is his words, if not, there is going to be a lot of damage. That would be damage to the economy, to the stock market, the bond market, and the US dollar, in my opinion. So I'll play this clip for you from Mohamed El-Erian and Jonathan Ferro.
Can we go back to 2011? You're at PIMCO, you're going through this debt ceiling drama. What were the lessons from that for this right now? Lots of similarities for you?
Yes, except that this time around, the front end of the Treasury curve is behaving differently from back then. But I think the view then is the market view now for most market segments, not all, most, which is you should look through this, is going to be resolved because ultimately the consequences of a debt default are that both parties get blamed. So at the end of the day, you will get a solution. The question is, what are the compromises that need to be made? It's interesting that the principals are meeting today. Normally, you don't put the principals in the room unless the staff got to some sort of agreement.
And yet we're told that the staff haven't got to an agreement and have barely made progress, depending on who you listen to in Washington.
Yeah, depending on who you listen to in Washington. That's the issue, right?
Going forward from here, Mohamed, is it a European-type playbook that you need to get close to crisis before you provide a solution? Is it that down in Washington?
It is that for the debt ceiling, yes.
Do you see it spilling out from the at-risk maturities at the moment to somewhere else in the market, or does it remain contained there? Is there broader market risk here for you?
So I think the broader market risk is low, but that is what the market thinks as a whole. So if it turns out that we're wrong, there's going to be a lot of damage.
Since they were talking about the debt ceiling, I thought it reminded me of this website, which I've shown before, the US Debt Clock. And where, if you go to usdebtclock.org, you will find that all of the areas where there's debt, state debt, national debt, corporate debt, total, annual, etc., the clocks are just spinning. So every one of them. So you can see what the current numbers are. So yesterday I took a picture of this so you can see the magnitude of the debt, what they're negotiating on. So the current debt is $31.8 trillion. When you go to break this down for you of what's going on each year, go to the center of this chart. At the top center, I have a red box, and this is the revenue, generally taxes and fees and so forth, that the government collects. 4.5 trillion is coming into the US government. When you go to the left, you would see in a blue box two items. The first is the amount of spending that we're doing. We're spending 6 trillion, taking in 4.5, and leaving us with a deficit on this year of 1.4 trillion. This has been going on for a long time. As long as I've been looking at this, for years and years, there's always a deficit. And so what this means to me is we, meaning Congress, we as a nation, we can't live within our means. So no matter what we have that comes in tax revenue, we somehow seem to spend more, or Congress spends more than they take in. And they can't help themselves, it seems like. They go back to Washington, they have all these grand promises that they make during their campaigning, and they go back there and they just spend. And by the way, both parties are guilty. So the Democrats and Republicans are equally as guilty. And then they come up to this period where they hit the debt ceiling, and then they posture and eventually negotiate something. Sometimes they even do what's called a continuing resolution, where they kick the can down the road and say, let's deal with it in 6 months or something. But eventually it gets dealt with. And then they go back to passing bills and spending money. And so I think of it like in a household or a small business, let's just say household. So in your household, you have so much income that comes in. And so you have obligations, you have bills that you've taken on, maybe you even have some debt, and you have to pay those things. There is not an option for you or me to say, I'm not going to pay my bills. Or if we run negative, then okay, maybe we can borrow money, but only for a while, only for a limited amount. And then you have to pay back the loan plus the interest. That's the way it works. So that's a world that we all live in, but Congress gets back there and they just ignore that. So it becomes, this debt has accumulated and accumulated. Back in approximately in 1980, we had about $1 trillion of debt. And we got up to all the way to about 2008, and we had 10 trillion. And here we are today at 31 trillion. So it took us a long time to get to that first trillion, but after that, and then to 10 trillion, but after that, it has just taken off. And I think one of the things that's caused them to spend so much is because of cheap money. Interest rates were practically at zero, and so it was easy to spend. By the way, the U.S. is not the only culprit. Every other country, I looked this up, I think I found 5 really insignificant countries, some of them I didn't even know existed, really insignificant, that didn't have any debt. The rest have a lot or quite a lot. And we are in a category, I think we're about the 8th worst when you measure debt to GDP, gross domestic product, your economic output. When you measure that, we're in the 8th. So we're in the top tier, the bad top tier. And, but all developed countries and undeveloped countries, politicians couldn't help themselves. But now interest rates are going up. So this is causing more of a problem that eventually there has to be a reckoning. So, but I don't know, this can't go to the moon. It's not going to go forever. And again, we're not the only culprit. Everybody's in the same situation. So we'll see how it plays out. But I wanted you to see, context of where we are with the debt. Next, Becky Quick interviews Oppenheimer's Brian Nagel, and just a very short piece. It's about 1 minute. I'll play it for you. And this is interesting to me because it is they're talking about the Home Depot. Last week, Home Depot came out with their quarterly earnings and revenue report. And it's significant because Home Depot is kind of a bellwether, a canary in the coal mine, if you will, for the U.S. economy, because it is a reflection of what's going on with housing, and it's a reflection of what's going on with the consumer, their inclination to spend or to not spend on a discretionary basis. So a very, very significant indicator. And what happened was Home Depot missed their revenue projections, meaning their sales, by $1 billion. They fell $1 billion short of what the projection was or the estimate was by the analyst of what they thought would happen. Well, that tanked the stock. The stock has already been struggling, so it went down about 5% on Friday, and it's down about 13% from its high on February 1st. And so it's an indication that from both the consumer standpoint and the housing standpoint, that the economy is slowing down, and we are probably, as so many have said, through other indicators, we're probably headed into a recession. What that means is when you get to the stock market, initially the stock market will follow that. The stock market has been fairly resilient, and but it's going to have to come down, get corrected, in my opinion, based on the economics that are showing weakness, Home Depot being an indicator. So listen to this 1-minute piece with Becky Quick interviewing Brian Nagel.
Joining us right now for more on Home Depot is Brian Nagel. He is Senior Equity Research Analyst at Oppenheimer. And Brian, this is a little bit of a surprise. What do you think about the guidance?
Well, good morning, Becky. Look, I think you summed it up well. This is very clearly a miss and a guide lower from Home Depot, which, as you said, it's a surprise. There's been a lot of concerns out there in the market. Some are on Wall Street. We're calling for this guide lower, but I'm just digging through this report right now. This is a weak report from Home Depot. And like you said, what we saw is a clear sales miss in the first quarter. Now, a lot of that seemed to be weather and lumber prices, which are probably shorter term in nature. But on the heels of that, management did take down guidance for the year, which again, there's probably some conservatism in there, but nonetheless, they now have a more dampened view of 2023.
Now, thinking of Home Depot, I was looking for a chart to show you what's going on with the price of lumber, because the price of lumber, again, is an indicator, a bellwether for what's going on with the housing market. So this is the best I could do. This is not ideal. There are two lines here representing the top one, the light colored line, is gold. The bottom one, the brown colored one, is lumber. The person that did this wanted to illustrate the difference between lumber and gold. But if you look at what has happened with lumber, you can see how far it's come down. Was it like a year or two ago in 2021 when lumber was just screaming up? But it, as you can see, it has come way down. It goes through these cycles, but it's probably, again, an indication of weakening economy and weakening housing. And by the way, housing, the home sales are down 23% from a year ago. So it's already showing weakness in the housing market. Now I want to jump over into something this is interesting to me, and I'm going to tie a couple of things together. And this is the last thing I'm going to cover. The one is jobs. This article caught my eye from Bloomberg, and they were talking about graduates from Ivy League schools like Harvard, Princeton, Yale, etc. These schools, normally the top firms in the country recruit heavily to these schools because they get the smartest and brightest people out of those schools. And but the article said, when I read it, it basically said these students graduating from Ivy League schools are having a hard time finding a job. at least at the level that they are used to. Normally they would go do an internship between their junior and senior year, and then they would get an offer sometime during their senior year and begin working for the company that they interned for. That is not happening. It's not happening at the rate that it used to happen. So again, it's an indication that there's a tightening going on in the job market. After I read this, I saw a couple of clips, and I want to play these for you. They're from Mike Rowe. You know Mike Rowe, and if you don't, you'll recognize him when I play these clips. Very interesting, because the first one, he talks about the degree to which AI, or artificial intelligence, is going to affect jobs and the kinds of jobs it is going to affect. And as he points out, it's not what you expect. So he's a student of the jobs and the job market, and it's a very interesting piece. When he finishes this, these are both brief, I will play another one, which is a slightly different take on the same subject. So take a listen to Mike Rowe.
Experts warn some white-collar jobs are vanishing by the thousands, and they may never come back. Inflation and rising interest rates are forcing companies to cut their back-office workforce. Mike Rowe, CEO of the Mike Rowe Works Foundation, an all-around great guy, is here with this. This is not a surprise to you, but just to give people a little context, the jobs that will be in the most demand in the next 10 years, we can put them up on the screen here: home health, personal care, restaurant cooks, software developers, fast food and operations managers. Then if you look at Labor Department projections, if you look at the top 10, several of these jobs, like, for example, driver and engineers, they're the kind of people that you have been trying to help reach and also train through your foundation.
This thing's got a long tail, you know? I mean, 40 years ago, from my point of view, it started when we took shop class out of high school. And when we did that, we really just unleashed a storm of unintended consequences. Around the same time, we started telling kids that the best path for the most people was a 4-year degree. Not just a good path, but a path that if you didn't take, you're going to wind up with some sort of vocational consolation prize. That steady drumbeat, after 40 years, that's what we're seeing right now. We've got over 11 million open positions, most of which don't require a 4-year degree. We got $1.7 trillion in student debt on the books. We're lending money to kids who will never be able to pay it back to train them for a lot of jobs that no longer exist. And we still just have our thumb on the scale. We're still saying these jobs are good, these jobs are bad. I've been hearing for years that robots are going to wreck blue collar work. Turns out AI is coming for your white collar job.
Yeah.
It's all backwards. Yeah. And it's a heck of a thing to unpack.
So interesting. I just look at home health care and personal care. I think about we're living longer, right? Think about registered nurses. These are areas that are only going to grow in greater demand for.
Well, we were just saying in the break, Rwanda has this very, very young population with a whole different set of problems. Our population is getting older and older and older. I don't think you need to be an economist or a rocket scientist to see that there's going to be incredible opportunity in that area. But that's not a 4-year degree world. It's a 6-figure job that just requires a different way of thinking.
Now, this is the second clip of Mike Rowe talking about the issue about college. He points out that for the last 40 years, we have made college kind of the standard by which people should get out of high school, they should go to college and then get a career. And what happened is we eliminated shop class out of high schools. So those who are not oriented to go to college, it doesn't fit everybody. We have, as he says, 11 million jobs that are waiting for people, and we don't have qualified people for them. People who work with their hands a lot of times. And so he's making the case for the fact that we should be thinking of and telling our young people to think about alternatives to college, because some kids go to college and they don't know what they're going to do. They rack up a big bill. They're left with $100,000 of debt with a philosophy degree or something like that. and then they're a barista or something like that. It's a waste of time and money and talent, because sometimes people could go into the trades or go into some kind of a technical school, develop a skill. And he does an interview with a young lady here who became a welder, and he said, she's making mid six figures. I think what he means is like about 150,000. It's a lot of money, but she chose to go that route rather than to go to college and pursue even a medical degree. So interesting additional piece from Mike Rowe. So take a listen.
We have to do the same thing with
Well,
work.
you are doing that work right now. Your foundation is doing that work. I just want to play a clip of one young lady who's benefiting from the work that your foundation is doing. Roll tape.
Some people say there's no opportunity for women in the trades. Those people never met Chloe Hudson. You entered a field that historically has been dominated by men, welding.
My dad, he really instilled in me that there is absolutely nothing that I'm incapable of. The women in the 40s and 50s, they blazed that trail, and they did it with red lipstick. I'm not a female welder. I'm not a weld-her. I'm not a tradeswoman. I'm just a welder. That's what I do for a living, and I love it.
Told me a secret about her that she actually wanted to be a surgeon, a plastic surgeon at one point.
This close to signing on the dotted line she'd have gone hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And you know what? Chloe would have been a terrific plastic surgeon, but she just didn't want to go that way. My foundation offers work ethic scholarships to people who can make a credible case for themselves. We were happy to help her get a welding certificate, and now she's making mid six figures all day long. I've got 1,800 stories like her.
Wow.
To your earlier point, the more we share those kinds of stories, the more persuaded I think the current generation is going to be to at least consider a trade.
And your foundation is not slowing down at all, right?
No.
You're building up.
We're doubling down. We just gave away $1 million in work ethic scholarships. We'll do it again in September. And my hope is to do it at least twice a year for as long as people will have me on their shows.
Yeah. And the bottom line is, you're looking at some tuitions now of $80,000 a year.
It's breathtaking.
If you leave that kind of money behind, you're going to spend at least 10 years paying it off, if you can at all.
Look, the cookie cutter approach to what a good job is and what a good education is, that's what's killing us. College is not the enemy. That's a bad thing. But when we took shop class out of high school, you remember those days.
I loved it.
We erased from the sight dozens of really important jobs from a whole generation of kids, and we're reaping the whirlwind.
Rowe Works Foundation.
MikeRoweWorks.org.
Okay.
Okay, shift gears. The same thing is happening that happened last week with money, the flow of funds. Equity funds had an outflow of $9.6 billion last week. Bond funds had an inflow. There's trillions of dollars of bond funds, had an inflow of 198 million. It's almost insignificant, but is going into bonds as opposed to going out. And then money market funds, of which there is also a lot, had an inflow of 8.3 billion. So again, more, for whatever reason, more of a flight to safety. Well, I was thinking about the debt, and I saw this cartoon. As I said, the debt sometimes is, we think of what they do in Washington, D.C., I bring it back and relate it to, okay, what do I do? What is it? How do I deal with debt or making money and spending money and so forth? So I don't know if you can read this, but the wife says, "Oh my God, our credit card bill is through the ceiling." And the husband says, "No problem, hun. I'll just raise the ceiling. We can print more money." And the son says, "The only catch is the printer ink is $7 billion, Dad." So, yeah, they don't run it in Washington, D.C. the way we run our households, and they don't think of it the same way, although they should. So I bring it back kind of from a political standpoint, and I think, okay, who am I going to vote for next time we have an election? I'm going to look for the person who is in favor of balancing the budget, living within our means, not spending more than we're taking in. If I can find one, good luck. The one who really did a good job with this was Congressman Ron Paul. He's retired now, but he was a strong advocate for living within our means as a country. One guy. And his son, Rand Paul, senator, is somewhat the same way, but he's not as strident as his dad was. And then the senator, who's now deceased actually, Tom Coburn, and he made it his kind of his mission to, while he was a senator, to find areas where there was waste in government. And so he proposed like 1,000 amendments to every bill, and I'm sure it had to do with not spending more than we're taking in. And then he wrote about 50 different articles on the same thing. I think he came up with around $200 billion of waste. This is fraud, duplication, unnecessary programs, etc. Things like this I don't think should be political. I mean, the budget items of the Democrats want to spend it one way. The Republicans want to spend it another way. That can be debated. That's political. But living within our means doesn't seem like it should be political. So it seemed like it should be kind of like what we do with our home. But it's interesting that not just we, but every other country has the same problem. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below.